Welcome, everyone. We're going to give a few seconds here just to let everyone get into the room, and then I'll do a brief intro, whatever. TGIF. Okay.
That guy, it's Friday.
Started drinking already.
Yes. I honestly haven't. Okay. We have 110 people registered today, so it's a good group. And it's looking like we have about half of the people in here now, so I am going to go ahead and start. Welcome to the third in the series of webinars this month that the Kansas Disability Caucus is hosting. Some of you have joined us for all of them. Thank you. That's great. I'm Noelle Kurth. I'm a member of the Kansas Disability Caucus Board and a disability researcher at KU. Today's webinar, we're going to hear from a panel of expert advocates who Amy will introduce here shortly. I'm just going to do a little housekeeping first. The caucus would like to acknowledge Sunflower Health Plan for their generous support of the webinar series this month. Thank you, Sunflower. And now, let's see, you see on your screen that some directions. Live captioning is available today and being provided by Jane Piles. Thank you, Jane. You turn on the captions by clicking on the CC in the Zoom toolbar. You'll see a show subtitle, which turns on the captions. And in that same location, you can adjust the size of the captions to meet your needs by selecting subtitle settings in that same box. We also have sign language interpreters on the webinar today. Jolene and Kim will be interpreting for us today. Thank you. As you know, we're using webinar on Zoom, and so you need to make sure that you're in gallery view so that you can see the screen and that you can see the speakers and the interpreters. In order to make sure that you can, in case you're only seeing the welcome screen or the graphics on the screen, or you're only seeing individuals, just go up to the top of the page where it says there's a green bar and it says you're viewing Kansas Disability Caucus's screen. Next to that is view options. Click on that arrow and just make sure that you're in side-by-side mode so that you can see everything. The option is at the bottom of the list, and there should be a check mark next to side-by-side mode once you are in that view. Q&A and chat boxes are available for you to use. If you're on Zoom, you use the chat box to communicate with everyone, and we'll make sure that comments or questions are voiced there and in the Q&A. If the chat box or Q&A isn't accessible to you, you can use raise your hand. If you're on Zoom, just click that raise hand button. And if you're joining us on the telephone, just press *9 to raise your hand, and I will call on you and unmute your line so that you can speak. I think that's about it. Just a heads up, the caucus is hoping to do another series of these webinars later in the year. We're not sure of a time. So we're looking for topics of what people might want to hear about. So there's a short two-question evaluation that'll pop up when the webinar is over. And if you have any ideas about future webinars, please let us know. And now I am going to turn things over to Amy, who is our moderator today.
Thank you, Noelle. Hi, so my name is Amy, and I first off definitely want to thank folks who have been here for previous of these webinars. It's very exciting. I am a member of the Kansas Disability Caucus Board of Directors. And so we are really excited to be able to take sort of the consumer focus from our caucus that we have once every other year, and to move it into a format and make these types of learning and sharing sessions available, kind of outside of our usual every other year pattern. And so I am particularly excited about the panel that we have today, because it really is sort of the crowning glory of the work that we've been doing the past 2 weeks in terms of talking about our community and the priorities of our community that first week, And then second week, getting the information from Barb and Sean about sort of how legislative advocacy and it happens, or how the legislature works, and then bringing us to this final week where we have this amazing group of panelists who are all people who have amazing and different, diverse backgrounds in their advocacy journey, to come and talk to us today about advocacy, how they've done advocacy, how they do advocacy, share stories of, you know, obstacles and barriers, and then talk about sort of how they have succeeded as well, so that we can open up a dialogue and amongst ourselves and begin to sort of open our minds to the idea of advocacy and how it happens and how doing advocacy fits for each one of us when we return back to our own homes and communities to, to engage our legislators or other policymakers. So we have with us here today, I'm going to do a brief introduction. Most of you, I'm sure, were probably signed up because you saw the amazing credentials of the folks that are on joining us today. And so I'm not going to reread that. I'm just going to give you sort of a brief background on folks because, you know, I don't like to go by any of the rules. You know how that works. So we're going to start with, so we have with us today, Kerry Greenwood. And so Carrie has actually worked for the Kansas Youth Empowerment Academy, really helping bring up generations of new advocates through the programming and the work that she does there. You know, Carrie is somebody who has a lived experience of advocacy, as she has, has lived with her disability her whole life and has managed to successfully navigate the patchwork of programs and systems that are necessary to sort of get us all to our best life. So Carrie, next we have Heather Matty. And so Heather joins us from very far away. Just kidding. She started very far away in Pennsylvania. And Heather has done everything from direct action with the organization ADAPT, who some of you may know as a group near and dear to my heart, through her peer support, her support as an in-home worker. And now Heather is working for the Brain Injury Association of Kansas City, to help with their policy and peer programs there. Next, we have Kathy Lobb. And so anybody who has spent any time at the Kansas State House has had the opportunity to hear Kathy Lobb give testimony and share sort of her story about how critical services and supports have been in her life, helping support her move out of an institution in the 1970s to living in her own home now that she and working a job which she's actually getting ready to move into the sort of the next phase of. So Kathy's somebody who's had advocacy and self-advocacy intervenes across the lifespan. Kendra Burgess actually joins us from Kansas City, from the Whole Person. And Kendra actually has a really interesting background, having worked for Senator Claire McCaskill. So anybody that watches MSNBC, you have to wait about 10 minutes before former Senator McCaskill pops up. And Kendra spent several years supporting her and really brings kind of not just her own experience as an advocate, but also brings sort of an opportunity for us to talk about what goes on behind the looking glass and her perspective about what effective advocacy is from the side of the people who we go to talk to. Finally, we have Oshara Hayes, who has done amazing work in the local Topeka community. Most recently, her work with the Poor People's Campaign. The Poor People's Campaign is a national revival. And so, you know, it is a fantastic way to take sort of these national issues to the local level and push those issues in a very meaningful way in the communities where people are most impacted. Oshara is an artist. I call her an art activist or an artivist who uses music, who uses song. She's joined our local ADAPT group in doing direct action. So she's somebody who brings advocacy in a myriad of ways. Her work with local artist communities and things like that to really push issues forward for our community. And so it is amazing. I'm so glad to have this whole group of folks here with us today. So what we've done is we've kind of prepared some initial questions to kind of get the stories out. As Noelle mentioned, as people have questions, pop those up in the chat box, give us a Q&A. We'll be monitoring it. We will be saving like questions that are sort of more general in their terms. We'll save those to the end. But if you have something specific to the topics that we're talking about now, go ahead and pop those up and I'll be monitoring, and we'll sort of cut in and out, make this seem more, what we want is more of a conversation than a talking act, notwithstanding what I'm doing right now, which is talking at you. So anyhow, let's go ahead and get started. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to start by having our advocates, our guests, tell us about their advocacy journey. So how it is that you came to advocate or to self-advocate. And so we're going to start with Kendra.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Kendra Burgess, and I am so honored to be with you guys today to talk about such an impactful topic of advocacy. And so right now, I am the public policy coordinator at the Whole Person. And so my world is very advocacy driven. And so, but it started back when I was in high school. So when I was in high school, I was an astute learner, and I loved challenging myself to learn all the things. And so there was one year in particular, I think it was my sophomore year of high school, that one year we didn't have the books that we had the previous year in our classroom. And I was so upset. And so I went to my math teacher at the time and I said, you know, how come we don't have this one particular book that we need for this year? And he started to explain to me about something called the No Child Left Behind Act. If any of you all remember that, from that time when it was really active, it was basically this law that was put in place for schools that weren't performing. And so if you didn't meet a certain criteria or test at a certain level, then funding was stripped away from that particular school until you could bring your testing scores up for the entire school. And so it meant that we couldn't afford the books that we needed for my classroom. And that was the first time in my life that I personally experienced how a law impacted my life in particular, how it trickled all the way down from, Washington, D.C. and impacted me right where I was. And so that was a very profound experience for me. And it made me want to pay more attention to government and the laws that were being passed. And I think that's the first time that I kind of cognitively realized that, this is something that I might want to do as a career one day. And from there, it went on to, I had further experiences with the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, as you all know. And so that Affordable Care Act directly helped my father to be able to afford prescription drugs and insurance. And it directly increased the length of his life. And that was just so profound for me. He was a person with a disability at the time. He was on Social Security disability. And so that law in particular really impacted his health. And that was something I'll never forget. And then the third experience that I had, among others, was also with my own experience in college. So you know, as a struggling college student, you know, I come from humble beginnings. And so my parents couldn't afford college for me. So I had to apply for scholarships and get grants. And there was one year in particular that I fell short for some particular reason, just in terms of the timing of my funding. And I went to the financial aid office at UMKC, and I'm standing at the cashier's desk begging, like, please, is there anything that you can do? I can't afford, I don't want to drop out of school just because I can't afford it. And then so she looked up in her system, she's like, well, let me see what we can do. And she found that the Obama HIP administration had passed a particular executive order giving college students more funding. And so that semester I was able to remain in school, and that was so huge for me. And so through these and other experiences, I directly found that, wow, these laws that are happening at the city, state, and federal level directly impact my own individual life. And I knew I wanted to do this as a career. And so shortly after that, I was accepted to receive an internship in Washington, D.C. To intern for Senator Claire McCaskill on the Hill. And so that was a great, phenomenal experience, as you all can imagine. And during that experience, I was able to communicate with so many elected officials, like the people that I saw on TV, guys. They were right there in front of me, and which is really amazing. And I started to realize that, wow, they're just people just like me. They're just people trying to make a difference in the world. And that really empowered me to use my voice. And so from there, I came back to Kansas City after graduating from college, and I got a full-time job with Senator Claire McCaskill's office in Kansas City. And through that role, I was able to advocate for constituents across the state of Missouri on a number of issues. So as you all, I can imagine, are aware, there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape when it comes to communicating with and trying to get problems solved with any level of government, but especially the federal level of government. And so my job as a constituent services representative at the time was to cut through that red tape and help people get real answers to real everyday problems that they were having with Medicaid, with their housing, with a number of issues, whether it was their pensions. And so that was a really empowering experience. And I'm taking a long time, I'm sorry, but that was a really empowering experience to see how people, individuals across Missouri were able to contact their elected official, have their voices heard, and then have problem solved. It wasn't every day, but every now and again, they were able to get real change for a lot of people that made a huge difference. So that has empowered me and stuck with me as at the career level. And then also at a personal level, I am a person with a disability. And so I have endometriosis, which is a reproductive disease. And so I have my own experience with personal advocacy at the healthcare level and in different areas of society. And so my world is pretty much advocacy all day, every day. I get to talk to elected officials. And I've even started a peer support group called Endometriosis Support Group for Kansas City women who are facing that same issue. And so I have chances to advocate there as well. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to stop talking, but I'm so glad to be here with you guys today.
No, it's an outstanding story. Thank you, Kendra. So Carrie, how about you share with us?
Okay, thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. So when they started this session today, they said a panel of experts, and I was thinking, I do not consider myself to be an advocacy expert, but I'm very honored to be part of this panel. What I will say is that when it comes to my journey as an advocate, it has definitely been a progression. When I was younger, I was a very, very quiet person, very shy, very quiet. I didn't know what advocacy was. I mean, I didn't know that, I didn't really know anything about advocacy, and I didn't have the confidence to be able to really be an advocate for myself when I was younger. So, you know, of course, my parents were my first advocates, and of course, through the years, I learned how to be a better advocate as a person with a disability. So it's definitely been a progression for me. You know, fast forwarding to now, I would say that my journey to being an advocate, um, it grew because of being a part of the Kansas Youth Leadership Forum, which many of you know, I work for the Kansas Youth Empowerment Academy. And so I got involved in that by being a delegate at the Kansas Youth Leadership Forum way back in 2001. And so I would say that that for me was kind of the beginning of realizing that I can be an advocate. And so what I realized, or what I guess you would say I've discovered over the years, that's really helped me to be a better advocate is that my voice matters. You know, I've realized that it's okay to speak up. If something isn't right, it's okay for me to point that out and explain why it's not right or why something needs to be changed. It's okay to, you know, to tell people what I want, what I need, what's best for me. I know what's best for me. And so I have to be able to share that with other people. And so I try to remember that, you know, if I'm struggling with speaking up about something and that kind of thing. So, you know, I've discovered all those different things through my job and through my involvement in the Miss Wheelchair Kansas program and things like that. So being involved in all those things has helped me to get to where I'm at today in my advocacy journey. And so what I've been able to do as far as advocacy over the years, I realized that I don't really even think that much about, wow, I'm advocating in so many different areas of my life. So of course I advocate in my job for the youth that I work with. I have been able to, through my job as well, advocate with legislators a few different times over the years through my job and things like that, and given testimony and that kind of that aspect of things. So I have had a little bit of that experience. Of course, I go to meetings, I'm a part of boards and things like that. So I advocate in those types of settings as well. I advocate, as I said before, I'm involved in Miss Wheelchair Kansas program and the Miss Wheelchair America program. And so being involved in that too, I've been able to advocate on a national level, being a part of a national board and, you know, sharing things in that avenue as well. And then of course, my own personal life. Again, I think sometimes we don't even realize like in our daily lives, we're advocating. And so I have been living on my own now since May. And so advocacy has really become an even bigger part of my life with that. I use personal care attendants every day. So, you know, while we may not see that as large advocacy, I guess you could say it is. It's very important advocacy to stand up for what you want and what you need. You know, I advocate for services that I need to receive in my life to be able to be independent, to get those services, to voice what I need within those services. Even just seeking out resources that are out there and saying, you know, I need this resource, I need access to this, things like that. And even, you know, I'm a wheelchair user. And so I fly sometimes, you know, I travel and things like that. And so that even that is another instance where those of you who know, if you're a wheelchair user, you know, or even just a person with a disability in general, traveling and flying and things like that can involve advocacy for yourself and even for others as well. So those are just kind of some different examples of how I've been able to advocate over the years. And like I said, my journey has been a huge progression over the years. I would have never expected to be on a panel like this, but I'm very honored and proud to be a part of a panel like this. So I think I'll stop there with my journey.
Outstanding, Carrie. Well, you should check out the chat. There are a lot of people who are very thankful for your advocacy, very supportive. All right. Hey, Kathy, do you want to tell us about your journey to being an advocate?
Yes. My name is Kathy Lobb. I work for the South Advocates Coalition of Kansas. I have worked there for 20 some years. I have been the legislative liaison for the South Advocates Coalition and advocate for people's rights with disabilities. And I have met a lot of the legislators over in Topeka. I cannot go into the state capitol without somebody knowing my name and saying hi to me because they know me. In fact, our governor now, we became really good friends. And over the years, I have asked her for things. And one of the things I have been asking for the last 20 years is for them to hire a person with an intellectual and developmental disability to work in the state offices, no matter what state office it is, or if it's federal. Since we have a president that supports things, we need to support him. And the other thing I wanted to tell everybody is in 1969 or 68, my mom and dad were told I could not live at home with them because of the special ed was not for me here in the state of Kansas. I had to go to a special home and school in Beatrice, Nebraska. I was there from 1969 to 1976. And then I graduated to mom and dad's living room for 4 months. And then I went to Cottonwood Incorporated, where I became a consumer there. But also, I learned how to advocate for myself and be able to let them know I want a job in the community. My very first job was working at McDonald's on 6th Street here in Lawrence. And then we had a chance to work for full citizenship, teaching students in high school how to transition from high school to adult life. I was project director on that. And then after I left full citizenship, I worked for Target for 5 years. And then I ended up at the South Advocates Coalition of Kansas, which I started out as a volunteer. Then they hired me for real because they needed somebody to go testify before the legislators. And I was never so grateful. And like Amy says, I am transitioning from being a legislative liaison. I am going to be the first person with an intellectual disability specialist working with the IDD and aging population and teaching other self-advocates how to retire when it becomes their turn to retire. The thing of it is, I don't want to retire right now. So that's why they created this position. I'm going to start that position in March. So I'm actually going from the legislative part and over to so I'm going to be working with Margaret and Bob Corn. And so I'm going to be learning from them, and I hope they learn from me as well.
Outstanding. Kathy.
I do own my own place
Mhm.
here in Lawrence. I've lived here for 20 years as well. It's uh, I have a townhouse and it's really a neat complex, but the problem of it is I have to pay dues. And my dues are like $1,200 every 6 months.
Oh,
And for a person with a disability, $1,200 can go a long way for somebody that. And I do have several palsies. So I know what it's like to be a person with a disability. I have lived it all my life. And so with that, if anybody has any questions, just let me know and I'll try to answer them as best I can.
all right. I promise, Kathy, I'm going to have some more questions for you. This is Amy. So we'll get to you. Let's finish up. We've got Oshara next. Talk about her advocacy journey.
Hi, I'm so impressed with everyone here. Like she said, my name's Oshara Hayes, and I'm glad to be here. And I was trying to think back, which I didn't know was advocacy, was a long time ago when at our high school, I did serve on a human relations board, and I didn't realize that with the principal, so it's a group of us that would find out what students wanted, and then we would relay that to the high school principal. And I had forgotten all about that. So I think that was a little bit of advocacy when you could at least put, let the principal know what the student body wants. And then I was thinking about how some years ago, my dad I was born in Dayton, Ohio. My dad was in Ohio, and he had I got a call from one of the relatives just saying that all this money was like disappearing from my dad's account, and they thought it was really curious. So I went to Ohio, and I had to advocate for my dad because come to find out he had dementia, and people were taking advantage of him. And so I had to find out the system there, as far as, going to the Alzheimer's Association, contacting other people to see who can take help with my dad's finances since I was out of state. And I was able to do that. And that was a process. And I was like, wow, I'd never done that before. And I didn't think about, when I went to go do that's what I was doing. It was just something I felt like I needed to do, and I was able to do at the time. And that was, I guess that's part of the journey. And more recently, just being able to be involved with different things going on in the community. And then as an artist, being able to be part of the Brown v. Board mural, and being able to do different things in the community. So I guess that would be my advocacy journey as far as that's concerned, getting up to learning how to do all those things. So
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. This is a fantastic journey. We're all better for it. Heather, you want to finish us up?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to here. My first advocacy when I thought about it was actually when I was in high school. There was a student, it was before the American with Disabilities Act, and her mother was in there every day assisting her because they didn't have paras or anything back then. And I talked to her and her mom and offered that during my lunch break I would help her. And that's how it all started, because I was frustrated that they weren't providing anything. And then when I went to college, I went as a special ed major, and I took a job as a personal care attendant, and I met Kathy Herzog, who is a wonderful individual. And she's actually one of them that was there when the ADA got signed. And she did a lot of different advocacy. She was a part of ADAPT, and as her attendant, I assisted her with that. And she also started a Center for Independent Living in Erie, Pennsylvania. And as a special ed major, I started doing my student teaching and things, and I was getting very frustrated that the students were not getting what they needed. The individual education plans and stuff weren't being followed, and it was getting me really frustrated. So I ended up taking a job at the Center for Independent Living in Erie that Kathy worked for. And during that, I started doing more advocacy at the state, especially with students and their transitional plans, because a lot of the transitional plans weren't being followed through. And I also then did Money Follows the Person, and it was so hard to see these young people in the facilities. And that really got me more involved. And then in 2003, I acquired a brain injury, and that changed things a lot. I was going from being an attendant to having one was a difficult journey, but I learned a lot from that. And I do a lot of legislative work and a lot of education about brain injury to the legislators and hospital systems and different things. And I also have to advocate for myself and getting the care that I need in the community. So I do a lot of advocacy with the MCOs, a lot, and that's a far way to go, but that's a lot of it. And I've done some peer support groups and things like that. And now part of my job, I'm at the Brain Injury Association of America. I do the information and referral, and I'm keeping track of the issues that I'm seeing across the country. That way I can assist with the advocate they have there to come up with another plan to take to the legislators. So that's how mine started. And I think self-advocacy is a really important component of too, to make sure you're getting your needs met and to stay independent. And I've learned a lot through this, and I just, they all know who I am too. And some of them learn not to take my calls anymore, but you just have to tell them the truth, and that's what I do. So.
Outstanding, Heather. It's always great to be able to advocate alongside you up there at the State House.
Thank you.
So now we have kind of a sense of kind of how our advocacy journeys have gotten us to this place. We thought that we might see if you all would have some suggestions for some approaches that you've found, some ideas to share with folks on how to be an effective advocate. So we're going to start this one with Carrie.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'm going to start with, I guess, more of a tip. And I kind of said this before, that if you're going to be an advocate for yourself or others, you have to know that your voice counts and that you are worthy of speaking up. That what you say, what you have to say matters. And I think that is the foundation to then being an advocate, like I said, whether it be for yourself or for other people, because knowing that gives you that foundation to then speak up for whatever it is that you want to speak up about. So I kind of want to start with that, because I think that's, for me at least, discovering that and knowing that helps me to be an advocate and helps me to have that confidence in doing that. So, but then I think for me, the biggest thing that I can say is to find your most preferred form of advocacy. There's a lot of advocacy out there. There's a lot of different ways to do it. There's a lot of different techniques. And you have to kind of figure out what works best for you, and know that whatever that way is, it's okay. Like, it's okay to embrace whatever that way is. Those who know me know that I am not the best person who's going to go out there and protest or do a sit-in. Not that I'm against those types of things. It's just not what fits me the best. It's not what I would be the most comfortable with. I leave that to Amy and to Luann and to people like Stephanie Sanford to do those kinds of things. Not that I haven't, I've been at some events and things like that. But what I've discovered for myself is that my best form of advocacy and what works best for me is to have a conversation with someone, to have a one-on-one meeting with someone, even to give testimony, you know, to present to someone or to a group, or to write a letter or an email. So those are the areas that I feel like I excel better at, that I'm more comfortable with, and that I can really get my message across. So I think it's really good to figure out what works best for you and just go with that, you know, feel confident in whatever works best for you. I do think that when you're advocating, you have to be firm, but you have to be respectful as well. To me, I don't think people want to listen to someone who's rude and disrespectful. And so, you know, when I try to advocate, I try to be as assertive as I possibly can. But I also, assertive means being respectful of other people too. So I think that's really important to remember when you're advocating. You know, think about why something matters. Share your story, share why it matters to you, share why it matters to others. And that will help get the point across to whoever it is that you're advocating to. And then I think that when it comes to like legislators specifically, what I've discovered, and years ago I didn't really know anything about talking to legislators, but what I've really discovered is that you have to have a balance of telling your personal story, but then also giving them the facts. They want to know the facts. They want to know how whatever it is that you're talking about is going to make our state better. And so you have to present that to them. Otherwise, they're going to tune you out. But I think it's also important when you're talking to them to share your story and kind of give that personal touch to why this is important to you, what you've seen, what you've experienced, things like that. And then in my personal life, when advocating for services and things like that, I've just definitely discovered that you have to be specific. You have to be very clear for what you want, so I need this because of this. This is the reasoning. So being direct, try to think from that other person's perspective as well. And that'll help you kind of know, like, okay, what might they come back with? And what is my response going to be? So kind of thinking ahead to that. Being sincere, I think, is important. And then I think being professional is really important. So like, let's say you're writing an email or writing a letter. If that email is a mess, then you're not going to get very far, honestly. They're going to throw it in the trash and they're not going to listen to what you have to say. So I think that part of it is important too. And that we shouldn't forget about that aspect of it, of being professional and approaching people in that way, so that you'll at least get in the door, your foot in the door, and then you'll be able to really advocate. So those are kind of just some of the things that I guess you would say more of what I've learned over the years. I don't know if they're necessarily techniques, but I think that they're things that I've learned through my advocacy work.
All fantastic pointers. Thank you, Carrie. Kathy, do you have anything to?
Yes, I want to let people know there's been a lot of people in my life that I've learned from, and also try to give them the respect that they need, as they give me the respect as well. Because if you don't do that, then you have people that won't listen and that might just say, we don't want to help this person because she can't help herself. And that's not the way the real world works. The world is the way you make it for yourself and others, because you are relied on for the kind of work you are doing and how important it is. Because otherwise you'll just be sitting around in somebody's living room or your home and not being able to do anything. And that's not the way I see this world. I see it as we need help when we ask for it. If we don't ask for it, we try to do it ourselves. I've been trying to do that for myself here lately. I'm going to be going off the Working Healthy program and going on, they say, the Feral and Elderly waiver. And I'm not ready for that. I just think that I need to keep working and be able to share my personal story as long as I can with people.
Excellent. Yep. Make it personal and emphasize all that you can do, your potential. Those are great suggestions. So, so Oshara, any approaches you have, effective suggestions, anything like that?
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
That's my advocacy. Oh, I feel so much better. I have to be honest right now. Right now, I'm like talking and I'm like, oh, but for me, being able to, for me, the best part to advocate is through the singing or through the arts, because it's like a release and it's like expressing yourself. You may not be talking. I may not be the best talker, but I like to sing and I like to be expressive. And in that, anybody can participate no matter what you're doing. If you're with a big crowd, sometimes people think, well, I can't say anything, or my words don't, I can't speak to in front of a legislator. I can't do this, I can't do that. But everybody can make a joyful noise, whatever that noise is, whatever brings joy to you. If you're in a group of people, I hear a lot of people say I can't sing, but yet when they're in a group of people, you'll see them singing, and so I think we can do that for ourselves, because I think even if you just show up in a group, even if you don't say anything, just showing up, that's advocacy right there. You're being present in a place. And when someone says, well, I'm fighting for this, or if Carrie makes a call, or if Kathy makes a call, say, I'm showing up to my legislator for this, will you show up with me? That's advocacy right there, because just your presence is going to be good right there. And then bring whoever you are to whatever you're advocating for. So if you know you like to sing, sing. If you know you like to do art, do your art. And if you know you can, make signs or whatever and advocate for yourself, advocate for other people, then that's what's going to bring the true relief. And it's going to be as you bring who you are to whatever you're doing, bring your whole self there. And that's what's going to make all of the difference. And I think, just being there and just being present, I think it's good too. So I had to get that out, and thank you.
There you go. No, thank you. It's fantastic. Appreciate it. Excellent. Yay. Heather, any suggestions for advocating with legislators?
Yes, there's a couple things. I know one thing I'll never forget. When I was in Pennsylvania, Senator Arlen Specter, he was one of the senators, and he told me something. He's like, Heather, I appreciate you because you always start with something positive, which sometimes is hard to do, but something I appreciate about the services I receive. And he said that made me listen more. So that's something I took on, and I still continue to do, is try to show them something that is working and why it's working. And then I go into what we need. And another thing that I've learned is have a agenda talking points to share with them. And sometimes that helps them to know what and I usually send it prior so that they know what the discussion is going to be. One thing I've learned too is when we were working on the client obligation, is I ended up taking in a copy of all my bills and bills of other people to show them the reality of it. And that really made a couple of them think. They're like, wow, this is a lot more than we ever thought, because they don't live in our shoes. So that that was something that really, to have paper documents and stuff, was a really helpful thing. And I think that also telling your story, telling stories to others, having them contact is another good thing. And sometimes doing the group setting is really helpful so they hear more than one voice. And I think, like what the other people were saying, is being respectful of them and sincere about the topics are and how the long-term effects and what the changes could bring is a big talking point also. So and sometimes we think it's just the legislators that we have to talk to, but sometimes it's like the managed care organizations, the hospitals, and do a little education about it too, because that goes a long way. Because sometimes like the professionals and the things like that aren't as educated as they need to be, and that brings a big piece into advocacy. So
Great suggestions. Great examples, Heather. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kendra, any?
Yes, so I absolutely agree with everything that the other panelists have shared. Very good advice. And just for clarity, I want to give a basic definition of what advocacy is and the different types of advocacy so that we're all on the same page. I think sometimes we use the same words to describe something, but we don't really have a great idea of what that is. Advocacy simply means working on supporting or recommending a particular cause or policy in a public space. And there are different types of advocacy. So there are 4 different types we've already talked about. So the first one is personal advocacy for yourself, like Carrie shared with her PCAs, or for myself, working through the healthcare system. That's personal advocacy. Number 2 is peer advocacy. So when 2 or more individuals come together for the same cause, like Oshara was saying, bringing a group of folks with you, that can be peer advocacy. And then there's number 3, systems advocacy, which is the community working together to educate officials and influence legislation and policy at a local, state, or federal level. And then there's also 4, legal advocacy, number 4. And this is where individuals or classes file formal complaints to seek court remedies with local, state, or federal elected officials. And it often involves the Department of Justice or Transportation or different entities that prosecute those civil violations. And so when going through any form of those 4 different types of advocacy, I think that you can apply similar things no matter who you're talking to. So I have 4 points for that as well. And some of these will be echoed from what the other panelists have already shared. But the first is to know your ask. What are you asking for? Sometimes it's very easy, and I'm saying this from the perspective of having been a staffer in an elected official's office. It's very easy to get lost in your story or your passion and then forget to thoroughly communicate your ask, why you are wanting them to act on something. And so that means knowing the facts of whatever policy or bill you are advocating for. So have the bill number, front and center. Tell them what the name of the bill is or the policy is that you're wanting them to work on. If it's in writing, put it at the top of the page. If you're leaving, if you're calling, say that right up front as soon as you initiate the call. That also means leaving something in writing, as Heather mentioned. That's really important so that if you're talking to a staff or an elected official, they don't have to rely on their memory, because our memory is fallible. And so if they have a piece of paper that they can reference later, that is always very helpful. Number 2 is less is more. A lot of times we think that we have to, be very lengthy or give them lots of documents or information. That's not always the case. Elected officials, they get to know a little bit about a lot of different topics. So they're usually not the expert. And so they rely on constituents and advocates to come and educate them on the issues, but making sure that it's very succinct and it's very, quick summary is really helpful for them to be able to say, I have 2 things that I can walk away with from that conversation is really, really key. And then number 3 is, of course, as we've already talked about, tell your story. It's important to bring yourself to the conversation and let them know why you're passionate about that particular issue. And then number 4, do your homework before you get there. So look up the elected official's bio. A lot of times that's available on their website. Look it up in advance to know what committees that they sit on, what bills are they currently working on, what issues have they worked on in the past, even what their past employment history might be. You might find something that is a commonality that you all can talk about during your conversation. So, oh, you like horses too. I raise horses. Or, just find something to build a rapport so that you are building that relationship, because that's really what matters when it comes to advocacy, is building that interpersonal relationship.
Wow. Dropping the wisdom. Perfect. Great stuff. Thank you, Kendra. I tell you what, we've got some other pre-prepared questions, but there've been a couple of questions that have come through on the chat and everything that I think might be worth taking a little bit of a diversion on. One of Joe, one of our audience members, has asked how, there's a lot of talk about sort of talking respectfully to policymakers, but maybe if there are any thoughts or suggestions on how to handle it if you are not being treated respectfully. Like, are there suggestions to help people kind of how to respond to that? Are there any thoughts on that, or is it?
Yes, this is Kathy. The one thing you need to know going in and being respectful to any legislator or whoever you're speaking to, you need to know where they're coming from as well, and being able to answer their question correctly. And if you don't know, you just tell them you don't know, because there's been a lot of people saying that we can't do the work when we can.
Good idea. So if they treat you disrespectfully, you know your stuff so that they can't, they may be rude, but you're not wrong. So, right. I don't know. Any other thoughts or suggestions on that?
I will share, I guess, a little bit. I think, if you're not being treated with respect by someone, then it's okay to point that out to them, first of all, which is not easy to do, I will admit. I am not that great at doing that, like just right when it happens, because I'm like, wow, did that just happen? But I think if you're able to do that, it's okay to say, hey, I feel disrespected right now, or I'd appreciate if you would listen to my story, or, things like that. So that would be, I guess, tip number 1, is if you're able to do that, just point it out to them. But I would also say that if you're not able to do that in that moment, that it's okay to, step out of the situation. And then kind of, I talked about before, that like emailing or writing a letter is sometimes easier for me to really fully express what I want to say. And so maybe you come back and you email that person and you explain, hey, I had this conversation with you, and I didn't feel like you heard me. I didn't feel like you wanted to know about me, or whatever the situation is, and explaining that on that platform. And that allows you to kind of think through like what you want to say. But I'd also say, if they're going to disrespect you, move on to someone else. I mean, there's a ton of legislators out there, right? So, if you have to advocate with that person, that's fine. But there's a lot of other people out there that you can advocate with as well, or advocate to as well. So if that person is not working for you, move on to someone else. Those are just some of my suggestions, I guess, for that question.
Those are great suggestions. So anybody else, any other thoughts on that one?
Yes, I have a situation that something similar happened to me. They were getting very frustrated. And I took a breath and then I said, can I ask what's frustrating you about this? Is it something I'm saying or doing frustrating? And find out they weren't frustrated with me. They were just frustrated with the whole situation and everything. And they, they're people too. And sometimes the issues that are going on with them get them frustrated. And I think when I asked them that, it really calmed the air a little bit and made them really realize that, it was the issues going on and it wasn't what I was saying or whatever. And I think that really helped with that situation too. I've done that more than once and it's been really helpful.
Okay.
And this is Kendra. I will also share. So there have been a few times where I've been interacting with an elected official and they have asked me or said something that I thought was very disrespectful. Not that they were being directly disrespectful to me, but I had to, as Heather said, take a deep breath and then just kind of go internally and say, okay, are they trying to be disrespectful or are they just not understanding the dynamics of the issue that I'm presenting? Because a lot of times, dealing with disability rights in particular, it's a difficult conversation to have for some folks for personal reasons, depending on what their history is, or they're just literally ignorant. They don't know. And so it's like, okay, in order to be an effective advocate, I need to oftentimes remove my feelings and my personal defenses so that I can hear them clearly and make sure that I'm not taking things personally that I shouldn't. And what I found is in those moments when I've done that, it created an opportunity for them to really learn and grow on the topic or the issue. And so I had to make sure that I'm wearing my advocacy hat first and foremost, so that I'm not taking things, too personally. And then of course, as Carrie said, if they are really being rude, point it out to them in the moment.
Excellent.
I was going to say that I don't have direct experiences like you all do, but I am experiencing something because I was writing to my one of my senators who's and it just as you're talking, I'm thinking these things through, and I know I can't be the only one, right? So I sent Facebook posts, I've sent emails, and just trying to contact, and I've gotten nothing back. And I was like, well, maybe they just don't want to talk to me or something. But as you all are talking, I'm thinking this is a new session, so they may not have gotten to my email yet. And it's opportunity for me to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, I'm going to keep up. I'm going to keep with it. I'm not going to stop trying to contact them. So just panelists, thank you for that, because I know I can't be the only one thinking that with this not getting anything back. So thank you all for sharing that. I just wanted to say that.
Just one other thing I wanted to say is that if you can't say what you want to right at that time, you need to express it to somebody that can help you, because we all need help.
That is an excellent point, Kathy. And actually, it leads me right into one of the questions from the Q&A. So good job setting me up. So the question from the question and answer is, how has being an advocate for yourself empowered you to be an advocate for people with disabilities different from your own or other marginalized groups of people?
I would love to hop in here if I can. That's an excellent question. Being an advocate for myself has taught me to be more empathetic, so that if there's an issue that I can't necessarily relate to, I think I just simply put myself in that person's shoes. And also what I've learned through my own personal experiences is that when I'm the one dealing with the issue or needing self-advocacy, sometimes I'm not the best person. I'm not in the best frame of mind at that moment to speak up for myself or to be persistent or whatever it takes to advocate. And so, as Kathy said, I will bring someone along with me to help me through the process in the moment. So I'll give you a particular story. So this was with my doctor. I knew that I was going to need surgery soon, and I had all these questions, but I was also filled with all this anxiety and then just the physical pain that I was going through. I knew that in that moment with the doctor, I would not be able to speak up for myself as I normally would. So what I did was I wrote all of my questions and concerns down in advance on like a little bulleted list. And then I invited a friend to come along with me, and she asked the doctors those questions and she wrote down the answers. And I said, feel free to speak for me because I'm just too overwhelmed right now to do it for myself. And that was just such an empowering moment for me that I've taken into my systems advocacy or legal advocacy as well. Like sometimes people, just like Kathy said, need a little help.
Excellent, great example. Anyone else? Heather?
Yes, one thing that she just said is like sometimes when you're doing the advocacy for yourself, it's a little more difficult than it is when you're doing it for other people. And that's what I've had people self-advocate for me, help sit along and help me with my advocacy journey for issues for myself. And that's been a really helpful tool. But one thing I've learned from when you advocate for yourself for different things that you need is the issue is so much bigger, and a lot of other people are going through this with different types of disabilities because of the factors that are involved and the difficulty sometimes of getting what you need. So that showed me to reach out to other people to see if they're going through the same issues. That way we could advocate together to be, about these issues are across the board, and it's just not for one person. And I brought that to the attention in some of my meetings too, and they look at it differently when you're then the self-advocate role. And I think that getting the other people involved and also listening to others' needs is really important too, so you can get the message across to everyone that needs to hear it.
Great suggestions. Anybody else have any other thoughts on how advocating for yourself has empowered or encouraged you, Carrie?
I just was going to add something to kind of, really, it's what Heather was just saying, is that I think we all have to remember that we are a community. We are a community of people with disabilities and allies of people with disabilities. And so what we do for ourselves is also going to help our community. So if I advocate for a certain type of service, or if I advocate for a building to be accessible, or if I advocate for anything, that's going to affect a lot of other people. It's kind of like Heather was saying, there's so many people who are experiencing these things. And so I think that helps you to kind of have even more passion for what you're doing, because you're realizing that, okay, I'm doing this for myself. I mean, that's where it starts a lot of times. I'm advocating for this for myself. But then you're realizing, wow, how many other people are out there who are experiencing this same thing? And if I can help to make this change, it's going to make a huge difference for a ton of people. So just coming together as a community and realizing that what we do affects a lot of people in our community will help you, I think, in your advocacy even more. But I mean, I've learned also the opposite. So, being asked to advocate for someone else then helps me to use my voice even more for myself. So it's it kind of has helped the opposite way too. Because, you know, for my job, maybe I advocate for our youth or something like that, but then that gives me then the confidence to say, okay, well, I did this for our youth, so I can do this for myself too. So I think it goes both ways.
We have someone
can
raising
I
their
just-
hand, Amy.
Okay.
I don't know if, do you want me to unmute Colin or do you want to wait until later?
Let's let Kathy, I think Kathy was going to say something and then let's unmute Colin.
Okay, sounds good.
I just wanted to say thank you to everybody because I appreciate your words of wisdom, because there are times that I get real frustrated with things.
Thank you, Kathy. So I guess Colin, I guess Colin has his hand raised. See what he's got.
Yeah, I had a question for like Kendra, and this could be for everybody. But as you work with an actual legislator in an office, like, okay, after, you know, like we come in and we talk about our issue, or, you know, getting signed on to a bill, what happens? Like, let's say we give them like a piece of paper about the bill, like what happens and stuff, like, because sometimes I just feel I've been in adapt and I've done actions, you know, and stuff. I just wonder how like legislators feel about, you know, like stuff like that. Like, and what happens once we're gone, you know, in a way.
Yes, that's an excellent question, Colin. So, internally, what would happen? I'll just kind of walk you through my process. Yeah. So, I would have a meeting with the constituent or a group of constituents, and whatever piece of paper that they gave me, I was responsible to log that into our system. So every point of contact that we have, that we would have with a constituent, we had to log that into our system. So if they gave me a letter or documents or anything, I would log that into our system. And that looks like putting in their name, their contact information, their address, especially because we always took note of if that person was in district. So if they were, you know, a resident of the district that representing. And then we also were responsible to follow up and make any other points of contact for them. So let's say that I know that my colleague in the Washington, D.C. office handles military veteran issues. Well, it was my responsibility to forward that information over to that other staffer so that they could begin to work on that person's issues. Yeah, so that was always really, really important and really emphasized in our office. Or if you're calling, we had to take very detailed notes about, you know, what that person was calling on. So we had an internal kind of system database that would allow us to choose the topic. So whether it was, you know, healthcare, the various topics, and then we would log that in along with their contact information. And we usually at the federal level ask for their zip code so that we could put them into our system. And then what happened a lot of times too with that correspondence was we would then begin to build a history of points of contact with that person, so that the next time that they contact us, we could say, well, they have been consistently communicating with our office on these various issues. And then we have a whole database of information we could pull up about that person and what issues they're concerned about. And the reason that was important was because anytime, let's say there was a hearing on a particular issue, we knew that we could go back through our database and say, hey, you know, these are the people that are concerned about this issue. And then we would go and see if any of them might be appropriate to testify on that topic, or to give us more particular insight into their experience or their expertise.
Sorry, I accidentally remuted him too soon. Let me unmute him in case he has a follow-up. Sorry, Kendra.
Oh, no problem.
Kendra, just to cut you off, I just wanted to let you know that I thank you for your service, and I thank everybody for their service. But it's that I've been sitting here listening to you this afternoon. You've taught me a lot about listening to others and being able to let them know that we need to listen to them as well. And the other thing I was going to say, with the COVID-19, we're not able to go to the state capitol this year. We have to do it by Zoom. And that's going to be a new experience, I know.
For sure. Well, thank you, Kathy. You're so sweet. And I appreciate you all as well. We all are in this together. We all contribute in our own individual ways. So nothing that anyone on this panel has done or can do is understated, or anyone that's listening. It all culminates to move things forward.
I know one thing too that I have done is I've sent thank you letters to the legislators and things, thanking them for their time, and then they remember you. And then a lot of times I've asked for follow-up conversations, even if it's over the phone or in person, just so they remember what they're doing. But the thank you cards, I think, mean a lot to them, and it, you know, that they know that you appreciate their time, and sometimes that gives them a little more encouragement to go through with it and do more work on it. And I know with some of the other organizations, I like quarterly have a meeting with them to let them know what's going on, and I think they appreciate it too. And I just ask what their concerns are too, to get a better feel. But I think the thank you cards has been a really good benefit too, because it makes them know that they're appreciated and all that.
Yeah, absolutely, Heather. And that's so huge, especially as a staffer, because a lot of times it's a thankless job and people are coming to you with their problems constantly all day. So to hear someone say thank you, it just makes so much of a difference, so much an impact, and they're likely to remember you as well. And Colin, I just wanted to make sure that we got all of your feedback or questions. Did that address what you were asking?
Oh yeah. It did. I mean, I was just wondering, because I've been through, I've talked to legislators before, and I was just wondering kind of what happened then, and to really know that you do pay attention to like every type of constituent coming through there, not just like big lobbyists and stuff, and just
Yes.
just learn, just that to know, and to know that thank you letters work too, because that all right, yeah.
Yeah. And every form of communication is so important, and kind of piggyback to what Kathy had said, I know that we can't be in person a lot this
Right.
season, but I will tell you that, especially in our office, phone calls, emails, handwritten letters in the mail, faxes, all of that stuff was considered a point of contact and was tracked and paid attention to. And I'll even tell you that sometimes, with Senator McCaskill in particular, that she would be in the midst of trying to make her mind up in terms of a policy position.
Yeah.
And she would say, hey, pull up in the system for me how many pros and how many cons we have on this particular issue.
Okay, so it's like the volume of stuff and like that you get the number that really kind of just puts it,
Yeah, it matters. And not all the time is it necessarily just the pure volume, but sometimes. Yeah, would tally up, all of the comments that we've received from elected officials to decide how she was going to vote on a particular bill.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Very cool.
Okay.
Great.
Great.
Thank you, Colin. We appreciate the interaction, man. You know, just to let you guys know, it's hard to follow in the chat, but in the chat, there's, you know, some different comments from folks, you know, people who talk about how their own, how being an advocate for other people helped them kind of sit down when they needed to do some self-advocacy and say, hey, you know, if you can do this for someone else, you can do it for yourself. And then just also how important it is, you know, the question in general is, you know, especially I think right now with COVID, it's easy to feel like we're alone. And when we share our personal stories and people can relate to that, you know, they feel less alone. And so that's an empowering experience for other people, as much as advocating is an empowering experience for us. I guess sort of moving on, just to some general, there are some other questions is like, maybe if there are any barriers that people have experienced in advocating, anything that's been made advocating difficult. We talked a little bit about sort of sometimes if we're not treated with respect, and then Kathy mentioned, you know, COVID and restrictions on going to the State House. Are there any other barriers that folks have encountered?
I found out I can't have friends over to my house because it's not accessible, Amy.
We should fix that.
Because, in fact, I can't have Brad Lindenkamp over because he can't get in my front door.
Oh, the doorway's too small?
Doorway's too small.
Yeah. So, well,
and it was built in the 70s.
Yeah. So, well,
So,
yeah. So, well, we should talk about that. We should see what kind of resources we can get behind it. Fix that. Because, you know, we shouldn't make Brad sit in the driveway.
right.
Yeah. It gets cold in the winter.
Right. And
So
if he does come over, it's usually in the summertime when we can sit outside.
There you go. Well, Stephanie Sanford asked if you would have any advice to give to a brand new advocate. What would that advice be?
I would tell them to tell their personal story and be able to let them know and ask who their legislator is, because the legislators we have in the state capitol in DC right now, other than Jerry Moran, I cannot get along with, because the person that took Pat Roberts' place, he literally voted for stuff that Trump wanted done. And I just can't see him being there much longer.
So get to know folks. I guess that's a good know where people stand on issues and figure out who you can work with and who you can't work with. Kathy's decided Roger Marshall's squarely in that column. Shara, you got somebody? You got anything?
Yeah, I was thinking from the like the very beginning, just show up. Just showing up for something, because when you just show up, then you're gonna I'm sorry, of all the times my phone rings. But anyway, so when you just show up for something, then you don't know what's going to happen, but you can be inspired, you can be encouraged, you can, hear somebody say something, and then hearing them say something, then that's going to encourage you to speak up, or just show up when issues are going on, and then you can get something to think about for the next time. If you want to go to something in the future, or a hearing or anything like that. That's how I'm learning, just showing up, and then that's making all the difference too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Showing up's a big part of it. Heather, did you have something?
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, I was thinking like a couple things, like, you know, in the beginning with me, I was a little shy, believe it or not. People can't believe that, but I was. And I think being around the other people really helped to see how important it was, and just, you know, to hear other people's stories really helped me, the encouragement. And one thing I learned in the beginning, you know, you have to tell yourself you can't take on the world, because in the beginning I wanted to change everything and sometimes that's not possible. So give yourself some room and just, you know what the things you want to advocate about, and just focus on those. And and not everything we're going to get is going to get done, but our voices mean so much to all the other people who are going through the similar situations. And that's what the importance of all this is to have the voices of people so that they can hear what's going on in the lives. And I think that's really important. And like they said before, doing some research on the legislators, like, or the people you want to talk to, is really important too. And that really helped me.
This is Carrie. I'll just add a little bit. I would say that my advice is to know that you have a place in this advocacy world. Again, going back to kind of what I said before, of like, we all do it in a different way. So it's okay to start small. It's okay to be a little nervous at first. It can be intimidating to be in this community and see all these amazing advocates, and you're like, what the heck? I can't do what they're doing. And then you realize, well, I can. I'm just going to do it in my own way. So figuring out, again, what way works for you, and that you don't have to be the expert overnight. You learn it through having different experiences and advocating in different ways, and you grow as an advocate over the years. So just know that it doesn't have to happen overnight. I would also say, kind of relating to the barriers question as well, that not everyone is going to be on your side. You have to remember that, that you're going to have that opposition. You're going to have both sides, and it's just going to happen. And so you have to figure out how you're going to push past that, and you have to figure out how you're going to be persistent. Persistent is very important, to be determined and decide how far you want to go with something, and if you really truly believe in it, figuring out how to get your point across and how to get to the end of what you really want, and how much you're going to be persistent in it. So I think those are just different things kind of to keep in mind. So
That's great advice. Kendra.
Awesome. What I will add is, well, since we kind of just talked about barriers, is that one barrier is managing personal offense in the process of advocacy. So sometimes, for example, I'll give you guys a real world example. I won't say who it was, but an elected official asked me one day, well, how come people need PCAs? Can't their, wife or husband or children take care of them? And in that moment, I felt, kind of things boiling inside of me. And I was like, okay, let me take a breath here. And instead of choosing to be offended, I chose to put myself in that person's shoes and say, well, maybe they're really just asking an honest question because they don't understand. They've never walked in those shoes. They don't know much about the disability community. So let me manage my own personal offense and choose to use this as an opportunity to enlighten them. And so I explained all the reasons why. Of course, many of you know why we need PCAs. They're extremely important. And so that can be a barrier sometimes, just internally within yourself. And also there are times when, especially for people who have physical disabilities, I imagine, when you don't feel like being an advocate in that moment. You're tired, you're frustrated, whatever's going on within you as a human that day, you don't feel like being, you know, the poster child for a particular issue. And so that can be a barrier sometimes, but recognizing that advocacy is a lifestyle. It really is. It's a lifestyle. And I think that many of the panelists have echoed that. So whether it's in your personal life or professionally or civically, or if you're leading out in the community, every opportunity is an opportunity for advocacy. Every conversation, every gesture is an opportunity that can be exhausting, just honestly. But recognizing that, you know, if I'm living this lifestyle, I'm putting myself aside so that I can support this particular cause or bring a light to a certain issue. And then lastly, what I'll say is in terms of first-time advocacy, if you're new to this, I would say that advocacy is a skill. So I would say I echo Heather as well. Like, I started off being very shy as a kid, and I didn't talk very much, to the point that some of my friends were like, "Oh, Kendra, don't you have anything to say?" And I was like, no. I was just very shy and quiet. And so it's a skill that you can learn over time. So don't feel intimidated that you don't know everything right out the gate. Just be patient with yourself. And lastly, I will say to connect with other people. If you want to live advocacy as a lifestyle, it's important to surround yourself with other advocates and other people who are passionate about the same things that you're passionate about. So finding community in advocacy is really important.
No, great suggestions. And that self-care piece is important. You know, I think that it is important that we talked earlier about people treating us with disrespect, giving ourselves grace and taking care of ourselves so that we can be around to advocate for ourselves and others is so important. So great.
And
Sure.
It may be on a different wavelength, but to me, it's still, it maybe not particularly with the legislators, but when I talk about, you know, the diagnosis of depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, and I had an opportunity to, I'm trying to remember how it came about, but oh no, I spoke at a suicide prevention, the 5K that they had, and through that, I was asked to speak to some students at Steeman High School, and I spoke about, you know, being stigma-free and things like that. And I didn't realize that things that happened at that high school either. But just listening to, you know, as Kendra was talking, that regardless if you're being that voice, that's even helping someone to think about something in a different way, to even change their mind in something. And yeah, I just wanted to share that because sometimes I get stuck in thinking that I've got to have this particular way in this particular moment, you know, stuff like that. But it's all of us doing something and like speaking up for that one thing or anything like that. So that's really freeing. So
No, it's a powerful observation. Thank you. It was great. Heather?
When Kendra was talking, I thought of a story that reflects like something she was saying, like, you know, with the barrier piece, I have epilepsy and I can't drive, so I have to depend on attendance for things and different things like that. Well, in the one instance, I ended up having a seizure. This is a funny story. You guys will get a kick out of this at a large meeting in Topeka. And this one was, Brownback was in, and there was another and Secretary Sullivan. Well, I had a seizure. Well, the next day they called to check on me to make sure I was okay, which I thought was really nice. And I got a meeting out of it. So, you know, you have to look at things too, different perspectives, and everyone at work got a really laugh out of that. But, you know, and then it made them understand, like, you know, I missed another time too because of a transportation issue and I had to cancel and they weren't happy, but I explained to them why. And that they started to see that the importance of the transportation system and different things that people with disabilities rely on. So I think that even situations that don't go the way that, you know, it's hard for me sometimes. I learned to use them in my advocacy.
Heather, I love that story. I just that's so how can I say it? To me, that highlights the fact that we are meant to be an influence in any way that we can. So let's say that when you're interacting with someone, your hope is that they'll vote your way on a bill, and maybe they don't, because they won't. They decide not to change their mind, but just giving them that what's the word I'm looking for? Giving them that insight into your daily life, you know, maybe that'll impact how they vote on the next bill, or just how they treat other people with disabilities, or, you know, it's all about being an influence. And if we can move them at any point along, move them to any point along the spectrum, that's still success to me. And I know that I was individually advocating with an individual, a person, and we went back and forth. We were arguing about something, a particular issue. And in that moment, they were very angry. They didn't like me very much. But then years later, they came back to me and they were like, you know, thank you for being consistent and patient with me on that topic, because I never forgot, first of all, how respectful you were during the conversation. And then also it made me do deeper research on the issue. And now to this day, years later, this person is like a friend, and they eventually ended up changing their minds all on their own on this particular topic. So you just never know how far your influence can go.
Very cool. Great perspectives. Another from the chat, our friend Philip points out probably another great pointer is he says that his brother actually interned for Senator Moran. Well, he's Representative Moran at the time, probably. And yeah, 8 years ago, yeah, representative. And he says, you know, it's who you know, not what you know, sometimes is kind of what that's about as well. So, and then actually Chelsea brings up a great point that carried groceries out for Senator Jerry Moran, and Senator Moran asked, you know, so what's your opinion on this issue? So kind of, we were talking earlier about that sometimes advocacy is talking to a stranger in the elevator. You know, sometimes it's you know, but it's the opportunity. Part of it is, I think Kendra did a great job of defining advocacy, but that, you know, just that taking the opportunity to give voice to issues whenever and wherever that arises. So it's great examples. Robin actually had a question, which is how do you get to meet a little bit more? Just how do you get to meet the legislature? How does that happen?
You go to hearings for one,
There you
if
go.
you're able to, and be able to introduce yourself to them.
Heather does a really good job of setting up meetings. So Heather?
Yeah, a lot of times I learned that emails sometimes aren't as helpful as calling. So I'll call to get the appointments. And a lot of times for me, that has been a better thing, in talking to their right-hand person and saying, you know, like, this is what I need the meeting for and everything. And for me, I found that calling sometimes is more helpful than just sending the email, so they can put a voice to it. And then, like I said, having it in the writing so they know what to prepare. And that's been appreciated by a lot of them. So
Hey guys, I'm gonna have to go. I'm losing power.
Thank you, Kathy. We've appreciated your time and your perspectives. Sorry that you're losing power. Stephanie should have plugged you in.
She sure plugged in my tablet. You're right.
Gee, Stephanie. She's coming for me now. Don't unmute her, Noelle. Don't you dare unmute her.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll hang on until you fade into the darkness, Kathy. So yeah, so how do you meet the legislators? You go, oh, that was it. We're done. Setting up appointments, going up to making, and then sort of making, kind of making an impression, whether, Heather has a very unique style of having a seizure, or Oshara makes an impression by singing and leaving that kind of impression for folks. I don't know. Does anybody have any last kind of like, I love, the stories are great. The stories are helpful. Any last sort of like, if you could say, a time when I really felt like an effective advocate, a success story, anything like that folks want to share?
Well, even though it hasn't passed, but I shared this with you all before, because we're still trying to expand Medicaid, and just being up and doing the die-in, I think even though they didn't listen, but they cannot unhear what we said. That's my thing, that I'm like, they cannot unhear it, they cannot unsee it, they cannot unexperience anything that we've been trying to, all of us have been trying to push through for a long time. So I think that's what keeps me going, when they're like, no, we're never going to do that. You know what I'm saying? But that keeps me going, is knowing that if I've said something, it can't be unheard because it's already been heard. So
That's good. Anyone else? Any other success story? Carrie?
Sure. So when I was thinking of my answer on this one, a few different things came to my mind. When it comes to legislative, and these have been a while back, but at KYA, we were able to get a lot of our youth together and help to pass a disability awareness and history law in our state, which encourages schools to teach disability education. And so, like I said, that's been around for a while, but that was definitely a proud moment. And then years ago as well, we were able to advocate with the legislature to keep funding for our organization so that we could stay open, which of course is a really good thing. And so when I was trying to think of legislative, those two instances definitely came to my mind. But I also have had a lot of personal stories in these last couple of years, as I said before, learning to move out on my own and have my own place, and getting services and things like that. There have been a couple of stories there, or instances where I did feel some success. And one of those was really kind of recently. I had to advocate for one of my PCAs to be able to get paid overtime hours. Because I had been quarantining because of COVID. One of my other PCAs got COVID. And so, of course I didn't want to take any chances. And so I was trying to have one personal care attendant help me so as to not expose other people. And you're not supposed to go over 40 hours a week for each PCA. And so I had to advocate to say, how am I supposed to have multiple PCAs when I'm trying not to get people sick? So that was one thing. And then another thing that kind of came to my mind was in moving into my own home, of course, had to do some remodeling of my duplex to make it accessible. And so I looked into funding from the city of Topeka to get some things remodeled in my house. And so what I found in the process of doing this was that you have to own your home for a year before receiving this funding. Well, one of the things I needed help with was to get a shower accessible to me. So apparently you're not supposed to take a shower for a year if you're a person with a disability, which of course is ridiculous. And so, I was advocating for funding for that through them, but also for a ramp for my house. And so, I wrote an email and expressed my opinion and that this didn't make any sense, and just kind of providing my perspective on things. And this is also an example that things don't always go exactly the way you want. In the end, they decided to give me funding to get a ramp into my house. They did not do the bathroom. I got funding elsewhere for that, but they did decide to go ahead and help me with a ramp into my house. And that was less than a year, me living there for less than a year. So apparently, you know, in that instance, my voice did make at least some difference. But those are just some different, I mean, there's been multiple, you know, experiences that I've had, especially in these last couple of years, that I've had to just really speak up and say, you know, this isn't right, or here's my experience and this doesn't make sense as a person with a disability, and this is what I'm experiencing and things like that. So those are just a few examples from my life.
Excellent. Heather?
Yeah, there's a couple I can think of. The one is with the client obligation. That was something, how long have we been fighting that? Forever. And I think that was a good moment for me, just making all those appointments, sitting down, showing them the realities of it. And just, that was a big point because, you know, a lot of people weren't able to get the care because of that. And maybe it wasn't as much as we wanted, but at least it got increased to give more people that. And just the approach I took with that was different than usual. And I felt really good about that one, and, you know, having my voice heard and things like that. And the other one that's really big for me is I know a person who was in a nursing facility for 17 years and he didn't belong there. And I helped him the process of getting independent into the community. And now he's been living on his own 5 years without care. It was just, he was not in for the right reasons. And that's always been something that, you know, really made me feel good, knowing that I was able to help him with that.
Very cool. Kendra?
Yeah, so I too thought of a few different stories, and 4 in particular stand out for me. I don't know why that's my number today, but 4. So the first was during the first year of me being public policy coordinator at the Whole Person. I was in a meeting with an elected official, and they really just didn't understand anything about centers for independent living. And so I explained to them how, you know, we're part of a national network of nonprofits to do this kind of work. And he said, oh, well, my mother I think she was in Texas, you know, could really use this kind of care. I've been even considering moving down there to offer her additional supports. And I was like, well, great, there's a Center for Independent Living in your area. And we right there immediately looked it up. He got the contact information, he called, and I believe he was able to set up services for his mother. And that was just huge for me. I'm just educating elected officials on how they can really plug into the services that we offer as CILs. And then the second one is pertaining to our peer advocacy group around legislative advocacy at the Whole Person. It's called Advocates in Action. If anyone's interested, let me know. But the first year we offered a particular class on like how to join boards and be a community leader, and we gave them specific training on certain skills. And everyone who graduated from that class ended up either joining a board later on the next year, or they just became a lot more active and informed in their communities. And so that's something I'm really, really proud of, just lifting other people up to do this kind of work. And then third would be on a personal level. So living with endometriosis, it's a reproductive disease. It's very difficult to diagnose. The average time for diagnosis takes anywhere from like 8 to 15 years. It's really that long of a process. And it's because it's a very complicated disease. And so just personally, I had to, you know, go from one healthcare provider to another, until I finally found someone who would listen to me and really believe that I was having the experiences in my body that I was having, and that ultimately ended up in me getting diagnosed. And even after I had surgery and got diagnosed, because you can only get diagnosed by surgery, even after that, I still had to continue to advocate for myself to get certain treatments. And my insurance companies didn't want to give me certain treatments. It was a fight, and I'm sure many of you guys can relate to that. And at the end of all of it, my doctor was like, wow, you're such an amazing advocate for yourself. They're like, we've never seen anyone be this persistent. And so that just made me proud, because for so many years, I had felt ignored, and that, what I was going through didn't matter. And so I was just proud of being able to stand up for myself in that way. And then lastly, number 4, was in my experience working with Senator McCaskill as a constituent services representative. So there was a particular individual who, she was a senior, and she was in a really bad situation where she was being taken advantage of financially. Someone had taken out a second mortgage on her house. It's a predatory mortgage on her house. And they were also, there were some other legal issues going on, but we were able to forward her individual case to the appropriate parties with HUD and the other oversight organizations. And it ended up coming out in the media eventually, but they were able to prosecute the individual that took out the second mortgage in her name falsely. And they were also able to help her to keep her house so she could stay in her house. She was like 90 years old. And so I will never forget that case, and how someone just going through the process of contacting their elected official, they were able to create real change. And it took a team of us from both Senator McCaskill's office and Senator Roy Blunt's office to work on this case together to get her this result. So I think that just stands out to me as a perfect example.
Those are fantastic examples. All right, so this is Amy. We are nearing the end of our time together. I would like to give each of the panelists kind of just a couple of minutes to, if you have any announcements, any upcoming advocacy things, any last kind of words or anything that you want to impart upon us before we leave. I know that Oshara is putting something in the chat, I think, for an upcoming event related to Poor People's Campaign. So I don't know. You want to start, Heather? You're off mute. So let's start with you, girlfriend. Last words?
I think that the biggest takeaway with advocacy is knowing that sorry, my brain's starting to get tired. That it's important not just for us, but for other people, and just getting and educating, like it's bred out. A lot of them need the education about the issues. And I think in self-advocacy and when you educate for others, it just brings you a sense of joy too, in that knowing that you're not alone in this, and that when you bring it up to them, you'll know that it's a public issue, that's not the right word, know that they're aware of what's going on, and that makes you feel peace and knowing that you can help others in the long run. I think that's a big thing about advocacy.
Awesome. Great, Heather. Thank you. Shara, you want to talk about your event? You're on mute, baby. Oh, Shara, you're on mute.
Thank you. Okay, so we're having a what we're calling the Kansas People's Assembly, which is going to be on February 10th. Okay, here it is. Okay, I just dropped it in there. We're having a Kansas People's Assembly, and we're going to have different workshops, and we're going to talk about advocacy. We'll talk about different things in showing that the people with the power, the ones with the power, we think of, in terms of legislators, but the people are the ones that have the true power. So we're going to talk about that and what that looks like and what that means. And then also on one of the nights, the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, there's two co-chairs. There's Reverend William Barber and there's Reverend Liz Steele Harris. So Reverend Liz Steele Harris will be here on our Zoom call, and she'll be talking about what's going on nationally with the Poor People's Campaign. And just to let you all know that, yes, okay, so we're in 43 states right now. And so what we do, even the advocacy with legislation and things like that, we know what's going on nationally, but like Amy was pointing out, it comes to the local level, and then we see what's going on. And then we have regional people that are like, okay, what's going on in Kansas? What's going on here? What's going on there? And then that reaches back up to the national level and advocacy in DC. So we're all just trying to create a web that we can all be a part of. And so just want to invite you all for that.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Mm-hmm.
Your last words? Carrie?
I don't necessarily have any announcements. I will just say, again, the couple organizations that I'm a part of, the Kansas Youth Empowerment Academy. I'll put these websites in the chat here in a second. So the Kansas Youth Empowerment Academy, if you know youth who want to be empowered or want to get connected to resources, help with reaching their goals, get involved in leadership programs, that's what we do. So there's that. And then I'm also, as I said, involved in the Miss Wheelchair Kansas program or organization as well. Thanks, Noelle, for sharing that. So Miss Wheelchair Kansas is an advocacy and leadership program for women who happen to be wheelchair mobile. So those are just kind of the two organizations that I'm a part of. But I'll just kind of end by saying that I just want everyone to know that you can be an advocate. It may look different for everyone. And you may be thinking, I'm not an advocate, maybe I'm quiet, or I can't do what these people do. And you can. I want people to know that really it comes down to figure out what you're passionate about, figure out what you can talk about for days, and that's what is really going to be the best thing for you to advocate for, because you're going to have that passion behind it. So find your passion. Know that your voice counts. I've said that multiple times today, and I just think it's really important for people to know that what you have to say, what you've experienced, what you're living every day matters, and other people need to know what your experiences have been so that they can have a better perspective on what's going on in our state, in our nation, things like that. So yeah, I just think those are kind of some really important points that I hope that people get from this panel today. So
excellent. So Kendra has put some stuff in the chat. Take us home, girlfriend.
Yes. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be here among all of you amazing people today. And the announcement that I wanted to make was regarding our Advocates in Action group at the Whole Person. So advocacy is a core service for Centers for Independent Living. And so we have a group that meets every fourth Tuesday of the month from 2 to 4 p.m. And it's open to anyone with a disability, or even if you don't have a disability, but you just want to advocate for disability rights issues. We invite you to participate in civic activities at the city, state, and federal levels of government with people, for people with disabilities, both in Kansas and Missouri. So no matter what side of the state line you're on, you have no excuse. And we do meetings with elected officials. We participate in legislative advocacy days at the state capitals, at least before COVID. And we just try to make sure that people stay engaged year round, to know that you don't have to wait till the big election, every 4 years, but you can stay engaged, and that you have a voice, and we teach you how to use that voice. So we invite you guys to come and be a part.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you all so much. Please, everybody, participants, thank you to the panelists. Participants, please remember to take the quiz or the survey at the end. And just thank you all so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's go out and advocate. So take care, everyone. Bye.